I don't care how much he's been coaching or how much he's been privately keeping up his fitness or if he's been religiously studying playbooks for the past 5 years when he's not been busy impregnating his wife.
So hello and welcome to All Four Quarters, your one-stop shop for news, views, and overreactions to all things NFL. This week we're considering coming out of retirement because it seems to be the done thing.
Hmm.
So hey, we got Connor here and we got Sean.
Well,
How are we getting on? How's all down in Cork? Are you weathering the storm okay?
yeah, still standing. A lot of wind outside. Luckily, I didn't have to walk the dog today. That was the big advantage of having a dog walker. But
So you just paid someone to do it instead.
he's an all weather guy. I have to give him credit for that. There's very few conditions in which he doesn't turn up at the door ready to go with the weather gear and everything. So
Well,
not.
that's what you
I
want.
I'm curious about it if it gets us to a red weather warning. If that's the line, because now we've established that the orange weather warning is on the acceptable side of the line. So
Hmm,
the next standard
interesting.
is red. Yeah.
That'll be a
Um,
fun one to try out now. See if that just how yeah how utterly disposable is this person to you that you're like, yeah, come on over. I'm too afraid to go outside myself. But you'll do fine. Very good. Yeah, nothing too wild or crazy up here. Our little dog was a bit sick on the weekend, so spent a bit of time hanging out with him and looking after him. Of course, he was all fine and dandy this morning when I took him to the vet, and
of course, of
absolutely
course.
buzzing. But yeah, no, it's just he was sick for the weekend, so we thought best to get him checked out. Turns out, still completely fine. So thanks, Loki. That was a good waste of money, but at least he's doing all right. Other than that, nothing too wild or crazy. A lot of crazy football, I suppose, but nothing too crazy personal life wise. Had my Christmas party. We had good fun. A very quiet bar that basically all the energy was out of the room by 8 o'clock or so. But we rallied the troops and we went to the nearby Korean bar that also had karaoke in it, and it livened everything up a little
Oh,
bit more.
perfect for a
Yeah,
Christmas party.
so kind of did the job nicely. Got to hear the lovely singing voices of many of my colleagues. So not all of them. A few of them didn't make it that far, but it was manky weather that day as well. So a few people were like, "If I'm going outside, I'm going straight to a taxi." So, but no, it was good fun. It was an early Christmas party, so we're in the festive spirit. And I put the tree up in the house as well. So we've now got the tree is up and all that kind of stuff. So that's all the fun on my side. I suppose let's go and have a look at some of the news. The big news I alluded to in the intro there is the Colts are looking to bring Philip Rivers out of retirement. They have him in to try out. He is 44 years old now. He last played in 2020 for the Indianapolis Colts. Steve Ballard, the GM, was there at that point, although it was under a different head coach, Frank Reich. In the last 5 years since he was playing, he's been coaching the St. Michael's Catholic Cardinals, and for some reason has now decided to consider unretiring and coming out. Now we don't know. I know the initial part of this is just to see does he still have it? Would he be able to play? He's obviously taking the call because he thinks he would be. The last season that he played, he had a 68% completion rate, threw for 4,169 yards, 24 touchdowns, and 11 interceptions. They went 11-2 and got into the playoffs. Now they did get roundly beaten in the playoffs, but I think it's an unusual one. I know Indianapolis are still in the kind of playoff picture here, but it's an unusual one to come out of retirement for, because like this guy is quite literally a grandfather now, Sean. Like that, when I was doing a bit of research, that scared me. I was like, Philip Rivers, like I know he's got like 15 kids. I think it's actually 10, but like we'll just say 15 kids for argument's sake. One of them's bound to have gotten pregnant at this stage, but yeah, it's a little bit crazy. The big one as well, Sean, is just that. So obviously 5 years out from playing, uh, he is a semi-finalist for the Hall of Fame this year for 2026. So the way the Hall of Fame works is you have to be 5 years separated from your playing career. So if he was to take a single snap, it would reset his eligibility, and he'd have to wait till 2031 to be able to go to the Hall of
Ouch.
Fame, which is a little bit mad, really. But what's your thoughts? Like, you were getting totes of mosh earlier in the year about young lads retiring. What about our lads unretiring?
The thing that strikes me most when I heard about the story is this really the best option? Like, I mean, I know the Colts are in a bad spot Danny Dimes gone for the season. Richardson gone for the season. Your seventh round rookie quarterback is clearly not good enough. You've got a team that is playoff contenders but needs to start winning some games. You need someone at QB, a veteran who can not make mistakes. But I'm thinking of this and I'm like, why don't you just try and get Joe Flacco from the Bengals? Like it can't be that difficult.
Trade deadlines passed, Sean. Trade deadlines
Well,
passed. You can't
get them to
trade.
cut him. Like it's the kind of thing like the Bengals. Burrow's back. Bengals are 4-9. They have no need for Joe Flacco. He got them out of a jam. You get Flacco to have a word with the head the uppers and go, release me, and then see if he can sign him or something like this. Colts be like the Colts thinking that Philip Rivers is the go-to, or I mean, you've got things like there are crazier options out there. I saw names like Taylor Heinicke thrown out there. If Russell Wilson similarly could get himself cut from the Giants, he'd be an option. But yeah, I just can't imagine a guy who's been has not been playing for 5 years. No, I don't care how much he's been coaching or how much he's been privately keeping up his fitness or if he's been religiously studying playbooks for the past 5 years when he's not been busy impregnating his wife. I feel like he can't be the best option on the table like for this Colts team, and it really speaks of desperation that they're going to him. And I just don't think it'll work out. I mean, I just don't think a guy can come back from 5 years not playing into a kind of a playoff intense situation because the Colts have a pretty tough run in all things considered, and just expect them to hit the ground running and get them the 3 wins or whatever they probably need to get into the playoffs. I can't see it working, and there has to be a better option. Is my entire sense of this, and I just think the Colts need to look for a better option rather than ruining Philip. And the thing about his Hall of Fame thing is if it resets, it's 5 years later, people forget his career 5 years more down the line. Like he could be, potentially jeopardizing a Hall of Fame chance as well. So yeah, no, this is just a bad idea. Come up with something better, for Colts, because this is not it, in my opinion, at all.
I'm trying to think. Taylor Heinicke,
Yeah.
Dorian Thompson-Robinson,
Oh no. You see, that's the problem. You go too far down, and you're like, no, these guys are actually terrible.
Tim Boyle,
Uh,
maybe. I'm trying to think
Oh
of like
God.
anyone who's actually Ryan Tannehill is probably still around.
Oh yeah,
He'd be
yeah.
less like he's still retired, I think, kind of, but like he'd be a bit closer
I
to
think there's a fundamental difference in someone who's been retired for like a year and someone's been retired for like 5 years,
yeah.
in terms of just general ability to play. Yeah.
It could be like to be look, it would make a hell of a story if Rivers was to come in and was able to do it. It would be quite impressive. And a lot of people would say he's probably going to be a Hall of Fame guy. He's not a first ballot Hall of Fame guy. I suppose coming back in 5 years after retirement and making the playoffs would probably lock him in storyline wise, but I don't know.
um,
Yeah, it seems like they're just really scrambling. I suppose this is the risk that happens at this time of year. But we'll talk a little bit about what happened to the team following the injury in the dump off. But yeah, I'm with you. I don't think this is the best the best option. It can't be the best option. Surely there's guys in like the Arena League or Canada you could just pick up and bring in a little bit
mm,
easier or something. Like it's just it'd be quite concerning. Although I suppose maybe they're just going he'll do as a break in case of emergency backup or something. I don't know. It's a bit of a crazy story though. For a year
like
that's all you had.
I can't imagine them bringing him in and thinking that Riley Leonard, who we saw a bit of, I don't think he's good enough for what this team needs. So they need a guy. They don't need a backup. They need a starter. And I don't think Philip Rivers is that guy. Hopefully,
Yeah.
I hope they don't think that he's the guy.
Yeah, but I suppose look, they're probably working on the basis that anyone who's a potential starter, all those rocks have already been turned several times over at this point. They
Mm.
can't trade for anyone, so now it's just purely, well, I suppose no one's looked at Philip Rivers in a few years. Maybe he's still got it. Let's move over to controversy corner. It's a little bit of a weird one this week, Sean. We're kind of back into this mire of like weird ref decisions and the New York office doing strange things. So the big example of this week is the Ravens catch concern. So basically, when is a catch not a catch anymore? 2 feet down, football move, taking a third step, a third foot. It's all a little bit all over the shop because what happened was We saw Isaiah Likely, who it's kind of funny, Tim, because this is Isaiah Likely of, toe 1 inch over the back line in the season opener last year. This time caught a touchdown in the middle of the in the middle of the end zone, and got both feet down, and it was called a touchdown on the field. And then New York got into the ear of the refs and decided to overturn that call uh, due to what's meant to be in controversial proof, and nothing on the replays at all would suggest to me there's irrefutable proof of you know them being able to overturn that touchdown. Like, I don't really understand why it wasn't a touchdown. There was some hand wringing then saying, well, maybe he needs to take a third step, and you kind of go, well, no, because that's not how it works anywhere else on the end zone. If you catch it on the edge and you fall down, as long as you've established it and you're holding the ball, then you're fine. You don't need to take a third step because you can't. Like earlier in that game, Rodgers had a ball batted at the line of scrimmage, and he caught it again, and it was wrestled away from him by a defender, and they said no, 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 he's got possession of that and he's down, even though he wasn't down. Like it very very all over the shop on how they're making these calls, and obviously from the Ravens side they are livid because that would have been the difference in that game. In fact, almost either of those two calls could have been the difference in that game. Uh, I don't really understand what this New York office is doing if this is what they're ringing in for and not other things.
Yeah, well, I think there's a wider problem here that we're seeing in an awful lot of kind of modern sports with the introduction of video refereeing and the such like. It's the you suddenly have to be able to measure, like a lot of traditional refereeing was very vibes based. I would think that people you trust people with expertise to look at a situation and go, that's a catch,
Yeah,
or in soccer that's a penalty, or that's a handball kind of situation. And the problem is that once you introduce a video and you have to introduce essentially objective truth, which it turns out these rules are not really designed that well for, you know, precision in terms of every single situation being able to be completely consistent, because you do have these kind of situations where these kind of borderline kind of situations where it's not quite one thing and not quite the other, and result is that you just end up with different video analysts or different referees in different situations making different calls, which is the exact opposite of the thing that you want. I personally believe that catch was legitimate. I agree with you. They have a problem, the NFL, with this. You made it really easy to score a touchdown by saying you just need to break the plane while you have possession, and as a result, they've kind of made it slightly easier to have to score a touchdown than to progress a play anywhere else on the field. And play is a good example of that. In that, I can understand a guy, has the ball but doesn't complete the quote unquote football move or whatever before there's a fumble if it's on the 30-yard line. But to me, if a guy has possession, which likely clearly did have something close, he was in possession of the football for about a
Possess-
second and a
yeah,
half, I would say.
possession of the
Uh,
football 2 feet down. Like,
yeah, he was in the end zone with possession. That if, for example, as you say, he'd been knocked out of bounds at that exact moment instead of fumbling the ball, it would be counted. Had he merely passed through a portion of the end zone on the way to falling out of bounds with that kind of possession, he would have. It's just the problem is there's a need to make rules so precise that you actually can't do it. You actually can't find the foolproof way of doing it, and the result is you get these kind of weird scenarios where calls
yeah,
are made based on very, very, very razor thin evidence. Now, I will say the bigger issue is probably they shouldn't be letting New York or whoever overturn decisions if there isn't significant, if the burden of proof
yeah,
hasn't been met. And I think definitely that hasn't been seen here, and you end up with situations like the Rogers thing happening in the exact same game where a different rule is applied. So I think it's the problem is I think it's unavoidable. I think once you have video refing and you have what the NFL tries to do, which is really precise definitions of everything in order to decide all kind of possible contingencies, you're just going to end up with these borderline situations which are neither one thing or the other. There's nothing you could do about them because that's just the nature of the beast, and unfortunately you just got to accept it. I think there's been such a huge thing about refs in the modern era because the games are so tight and everybody's so it's so professionalized in so many other ways, except that the refs sometimes make bad calls. I just think you have to live with it. I think it. I prefer to live in a world where the ref on the field has the authoritative call and you're banking on that person's expertise in being able to call every situation,
Mm.
and only if there's something really blatantly wrong should there be video getting involved. But as soon as you involve video replays, the very blatantly wrong gets chipped. It happens in every single sport, rugby, soccer, whatever. This incontrovertible proof gets chipped away, and suddenly they're making really razor thin calls that they shouldn't be making.
Yeah, and this is the thing, like the guys in New York have, they've got that hotline to an extent. There's almost an internal pressure or a desire in them to want to pick up the phone and be involved, to
Yeah,
like a
absolutely.
combo
Yeah.
of justifying their role, but also, you give any human a sniff of power, not to sound too dark, but like, they'll find ways to use it. It's just like I said, like this idea that like they're going to pick up the phone for that and not for other things is just baffling. The other thing, when I was just looking into this, Sean, that I found out, we'll have a discussion about this probably in the off season more. So the way they put Hawkeye in and they can measure first downs with Hawkeye,
Yeah.
they don't actually measure the first downs with Hawkeye. They don't do anything with the ball. The refs still spot the ball, and Hawkeye just says whether or not it is a first down. So they don't do anything with the technology to spot the ball, which is where the problem normally is in this thing. It's actually just the refs decide, and then Hawkeye goes, "Yeah, that's 6 inches short." That's just bizarre to me. They have this technology and they're using it for that. Like, because we
Well,
see it.
that I will say that feels like a first year of a rule problem, in that they brought in this rule and now they're realizing they might actually have to take a step further in order to make it
Yeah,
legitimate. Like that does happen sometimes. You introduce a rule and you realize you actually haven't fixed it properly. But the difference between that, I accept that as a mistake because it's a new thing. But the difference between that and what is a catch, which has literally been a subject of debate in the NFL for the entire length of my time that I've been watching this sport, and they still haven't been able to find an answer for it, is just, yeah, it just doesn't
baffling.
work. It just, yeah, it is baffling, and it's unfortunately, I think it is unavoidable given the way the league is structured in terms of rules and such like. But
Yeah.
yeah, it sucks if your team is on the receiving end, but what can you
Mm.
do at the end of the day? Yeah.
Let's have a look at some injuries. And Sean, we got a couple of big ones. We were talking up at the top there. Indianapolis quarterback Daniel Jones is gone for the season with a torn Achilles. It's going to make some tough off-season decisions for Indianapolis to make, as he's going to be a free agent. He's had success with them, but has cooled off in recent weeks. And yeah, this is an injury that's going to take 9 months recovery, so it's going to have him right into training camp slash start of season. So there's going to be at least competition being brought in for it. There is also an added element to this, which I would just say is a bit more worrying from the Indianapolis side, which is obviously the stories were out there 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, that Daniel Jones had fractures slash breaks in his leg. Now, this is not the leg that the Achilles went on, but he was playing through these, and this was, we kind of went, oh Jesus, that's a terrible idea. And this is quite a common thing that happens when someone is playing on an injured leg. It's that the other leg, they put more weight on it, they overcompensate, and then that's where you get Achilles snapping and tendons going and so on. So, like, to a certain extent, this is partially brought on by how Indianapolis were managing another injury that he already had in place. But what do you think if you're Indianapolis? Like, you're going to have to at least bring in a competition quarterback to play against him, because you're going to need someone for the for the off season, for the training camps and so on. But like, does this mean maybe Indianapolis are just going to be one and done and moving on from Daniel Jones despite his strong opening to the season?
Yeah, I mean, it is. I'll preface by saying I think it's quite tough on Jones himself. Obviously, he's had a very up and down career so far in the NFL, but he finally looked like he'd done the Sam Darnold Baker Mayfield thing. He found the right place for him to be, and he looked like he was finally getting into his groove as a quarterback, and probably going to get a pretty decent contract offering in the offseason. And as you say, goes out of his way to remain available despite the fact that he's injured, and it costs him. And yeah, I think the Colts are in a little bit of a tough one. Let's not forget they do still also have Anthony Richardson, although he's probably not the guy you want to be hanging your hat on if you have playoff aspirations. And so do they look for eventually a third quarterback in
Philip
this
Rivers
arrangement,
long-term
or?
deal?
I mean, it's a really tough call. I would hope that Danny Dimes has done enough in the Colts this season to get enough goodwill that they're willing to give him some time
Mm.
next year. But we don't know how people recover. Like Achilles injuries, people sometimes come back
And
and they're not quite the player they
it's
once
it's
were.
normally like your back to be on the field the following year, but normally it's 2 years detached when you're back to being kind of normal again, right? Like,
Mm.
and the other factor to remember as well is that Indianapolis don't have a first round pick this year or next year following the trade for Sauce Gardner, so they don't really have the firepower to move up to get a quarterback. So if they do draft one, it's going to have to be a low round kind of take a flyer on someone. So we'll see. Cleveland center Ethan Posick is gone for the season as well. He's torn his Achilles. The Chiefs' offensive line have suffered more injuries. Wanya Morris is now gone for the season with a knee injury. Um, that's four starters down, albeit I will say I'm not sad to not see Wanya Morris out there. Ezra Poole or Essa Poole actually looked pretty good in replacement for him at least. Like undrafted rookie came in like whatever 5, 10 snaps into the game against the best defensive line in football and only gave up 3 pressures in the entire game. I'm pretty happy with that. I am concerned that the coaches didn't identify that beforehand and consider putting him in beforehand. And Washington face more woes as tight end Zach Ertz has torn his ACL and he's gone for the season, particularly at his age with his injury history as well. This might be the end of the road for Zach Ertz. He won't be able to cut and turn very easily with post ACL surgery, and at his age, I'm not sure. And Daniels, their quarterback, re-injured his shoulder on a play. We're talking about that in the dump off, but realistically, that's a second injury to the same body part. Like I'd just be putting him in mothballs. This is a done season anyway. Like I know he wants to play and so on, but like there's absolutely no point in having him out there at this stage.
Oh no, absolutely not. I mean, their season is dead. Now, admittedly, their offense. I mean, it's not like he was playing particularly well either. So, I
No,
mean,
no, he wasn't.
yeah, just get him, let him heal up, let him get a fresh start to next season, and maybe they can get it kind of get a reset because this season is just a write off at this point, and there's no point putting the one valuable piece you might actually have in some danger just because you want to get a few wins on the board.
Yeah, yeah. Hopefully now they've got a decent enough relationship with their front office, with the coaching staff, that they can kind of just come to an agreement that, look, we won't fire you, but just please don't put him on the field. And just to close up the news section for today, we'll just look at some of the elimination and clinching scenarios we've got. So just to let you know who's now officially eliminated. So eliminated from the AFC side, the Titans, the Las Vegas Raiders, the Cleveland Browns, and the New York Jets. Eliminated from the NFC side, the New York Giants, the Commanders, New Orleans Saints, Arizona Cardinals, and Atlanta Falcons. And the teams who have cannot win their division still technically live for a wild card: Minnesota, Miami, and Kansas City. And realistically,
Wow.
long ass shots. These guys are all going to be dependent on other results going their way for anything to happen. So don't be counting on them too much. And on that,
I mean, just putting the Chiefs in that kind of company really does demonstrate how badly their season has gone. That's where
yep.
they're at right now. You know. Yeah.
Yeah, first season. So we've won the AFC West for the last 9 seasons. So we don't get to 10, unfortunately. Sad times. And on that cheery note, Sean, that heartwarming note. Oh God, I'm gonna have to talk about the Chiefs game in a minute. Let's look at the games from last week. So first up, Sean, Chicago at Green Bay, 21-28, battle of the big dogs here. This was when we were kind of getting into the sport. You'd often hear about this being a great rivalry back in the game. I can't think of it as a great rivalry in the like 20, 30 years that we've been watching the sport. But if this is an example of things to come, this is a juicy one.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the Bears have been pretty bad for a very long time, and with the odd occasional, they've had a couple of decent seasons. They had a Super Bowl run, but whatever, 20 years ago, whatever, and they had a decent season there about 10 years ago. But mostly they've been crap, mostly because Aaron Rodgers has been beating them up. But here they were, 9-3. Season was coming together very nicely, but this was a big test. You know, this is the NFC North on the line for all intents and purposes. If they beat the Packers, they would be had been in a really strong position take that division out. Conversely, the Packers absolutely, if they win, then they're in a very strong commanding position. And in the end, I think quality did ultimately show. The Packers edge out the Bears behind good offensive performances and a very strong kind of offensive efficiency that the Bears just did not be able to match. So on the Packers side, Love had a good game. He was 17 to 25 for 234, three touchdowns, interception. Christian Watson's really becoming the guy, that the WR1 that we all know it is. And I think even the coaches have been talking in media about how they need to get Watson even more involved. He was 89, two touchdowns here, and he really does seem like the guy who can make that receiving core. Sing, Josh Jacobs at 86 yards and a touchdown. It was all very efficient is the word I would use. They were 8 and 12 on third down. They were 6.5 yards a play. They've converted the one red zone opportunity they had. It was very much the early season Packers, who the offense you could just rely on to get down the field, bang 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 and get plays, or how they played against the Lions on at Thanksgiving. And that's the offense the Packers need to be competitive down the stretch, because we know that they're a good team. They just have had many weeks this year where they just have not shown that they are of that level. So Packers definitely proved that they're mettle and that they're ready for playoff season. For the Bears, it comes back to this thing that's kind of been nagging at me this entire season watching the Bears. I feel they're in a very good place, and obviously Ben Johnson is a great coach, and he's turning this team into something magnificent, but they're just not quite there yet. And we've seen a couple of games this year. I remember the Ravens game from a couple of weeks ago. They've won 9 games largely because they've had a pretty weak schedule, or that they've run into teams like, for example, the Eagles last week at a particularly bad period in that team's history. Or kind of season. This was kind of the first time they were going to meet a good team, who were in a good place, ready to take them on in a big game, and it just felt just a little bit short. Caleb Williams, in particular, I felt he needed to do just a little bit better for what was such a big game. 19 to 35, like just over 50% completion, is just not quite good enough for these kind of situations. 186 yards, he had 2 touchdowns. He did have an interception. It was a pretty big one. 22 seconds left, throwing into the end zone on a repeat play of one they got a touchdown on the week before, but Keyshawn Nixon picks it off to give the Packers the win. Green Bay are now 4-0 in their division, so all things being equal, they really should win it out from here, and thereby leaving the Bears probably looking at a playoff wild card spot, which is very good for year one, but they're maybe just not quite at the top level of the NFC quite yet. I think the Bears gave us a decent showing. They've every week this year, they've looked a little bit better than they would before. Their defense in particular is coming on quite quickly, although they just weren't able to stop the Packers when it mattered here. And the edge ultimately was this question of efficiency. You're talking about 8 and 12 of third down, whereas the Bears were 8 of 16, and the Packers seem to have that blueprint to go forward from here. In terms of the Bears, I mean, they'll be interesting in the wild card. I think they'll give teams a good game. I'm just not entirely sure they're good enough to win a playoff game yet, especially if they're going to be on the road. But for kind of the year one, Ben Johnson putting a stamp on the Bears and saying we are a competitive team again, and I have in Caleb Williams, I have my franchise quarterback, and I am building a team around him, and we are building the playbook to success. As I said at the very start in the preseasons, this year one of Ben Johnson Bears, I'm not as much interested in as I am in year two, year three, and year four. And now I'm very excited to see where this team goes from in future years. But I think we've got enough of the sense the Bears now. They're a decent team, but they're just not good enough yet.
Yeah, because this is the thing. Like I see growth in this year from the Bears team, and it is very much impressive. Like if you think back to the start of this season, even say week 4, week 5, and we were talking about, well, some of the concepts aren't bedded in yet. They have a huge, was it the home game where they had like 7 false start penalties on the offense because they hadn't got the cadences down and stuff, and all that stuff has been cleaned up rather quickly. I think they only had 4 penalties in this game. And now that they've kind of established what the book is, some of the play design that they have is incredible. That that touchdown they scored to tie up the game in the fourth quarter was just an absolute beauty. So they had the big man Benedict report as eligible, and it was very clearly going to just be a pass play to the lineman. And Green Bay did a very smart thing in response, where they just came in and they, well, many would say illegally, chop blocked the legs out from under the big man, and that was where that play was meant to go. But Caleb Williams didn't freak out, and he moved through his progression and found on the complete other side of the formation the tight end Loveland, and got the pass to him, and it was just incredibly well executed at a level that frankly. coming into this year I wouldn't have expected Caleb Williams to be able to do. So the way that they are developing in this is very good. And you could tell like that interception at the end was needed by Green Bay because if the guys had scored, there was no way in hell they were going to go for 1 point. He had a 2 point play drawn up, sitting ready to go. And look, that's the thing. Green Bay, like I said, highly efficient. Nothing splashy, nothing gaudy in this. Like, but just very professional looking. Christian Watson is really growing into his role in this offense. It is maybe a little bit concerning that Matthew Golden, who they spent the first round pick on, is doing effectively nothing in this offense at the moment. And I know they have a somewhat crowded wide receiver room, but if you're going to spend that kind of capital on a guy, you really want to work him in. And there was periods early in the season where he was working, but they just haven't been able to find the role for him. And I think if Green Bay want to kind of push over the top from just a playoff team into a proper contender, I think you need to be getting performance out of players like that. Like Romeo Dobbs had no catches in this game. Marcus Golden had no catches in the game. They were targeted, not very much. They were targeted, I think, two or three times max. But like, yeah, I think Green Bay look good. Green Bay look formidable. Green Bay continue to strike me as a team that has the potential to be excellent, but isn't quite there yet. And I think they have the ability to turn it on. I think they can take a step up, and this is a good win. And like you said, this probably locks them into winning their division and so on. But I still think they need to find an extra gear for the playoffs, and particularly depending on who comes out of the AFC, if they make it to a Super Bowl, who they be facing on that side. Next up, Philadelphia at the LA Chargers, 19-22, an overtime win for the Chargers in a close, tense, and extremely messy game. The Chargers basically got no wide receiver separation in this game at all, which doesn't help given that Herbert came into this with, was it 6 days removed from hand surgery on his offhand? So he went 12 of 26 for 139 yards, one touchdown, one interception, and took 7 sacks in this game. He was getting utterly battered. And his response to this, because I gotta say, look, I know that the Chargers, they're in my division and so on. I do kind of love just the kind of hard man mentality he has. He just says, "Fine, I'm just going to take to the ground." So he rushed 10 times for 66 yards, no fear of it. At one stage, he stiff armed a defender trying to tackle him with the hand that was still like all wrapped up from the surgery. So it was a bit crazy. Their run game worked well. Hampton went over 4 yards a carry, and they also had their only receiving touchdown. They kicked 5 field goals in this one, and we'll talk about that in a sec. That was the problem, really, was that like from a Chargers perspective, they probably should have done more with what they got. Like they couldn't slow down Barkley on the defensive side. He went 20 for 122 and a touchdown, but Hertz was just left in a flutter here. He went 21 to 40 attempts for 240 yards and 4 interceptions, no touchdowns. The Eagles just like we said, I think they've always been a brittle team. I think they're a little bit broken at this stage. Nothing was working for them. They went 0 of 2 in the red zone. And like I said, the sloppiness cannot be overstated, Sean. The standout play in this was the triple turnover, where Hertz threw an interception. The defender who intercepted it got tackled and fumbled the ball. It was picked up by by a Philly, I think it was a lineman, or maybe it was a large tight end, who then proceeds to fumble it again and give it back over to them. There was 5 turnovers in 11 plays at one point in this game. It was just utterly sloppy. Like the fact that it closed on an interception of Hertz in overtime was perfect. It was kind of a great encapsulation of what this game was. The Chargers were not playing their best football by a considerable stretch, but the Eagles just kept shooting themselves in the foot, just interceptions, turnovers, sloppy play calls. Like it was just silliness half the time that was happening in this one. Uh, like you look at this game, you look at what they decided to do, and you look at the outcomes of like particularly the passing game. One of these quarterbacks had hand surgery less than a week before this game, and it wasn't the one that threw 4 interceptions. Like, what is the Eagles' excuse for this collapse outside of terrible coaching and not actually having a plan for what they want to do? Like, we've been on this Sirianni is shit bandwagon for quite some time, but games like this show exactly how bad the coaching is there and how much they lack the vision needed to be able to effectively run a football team.
Yeah, I mean it's a very bad place I think for the Eagles to be in now. That's three in a row they've lost, which we know with this Eagles team is they get into the habit of losing because the recriminations start coming out, the locker room starts becoming toxic, people start arguing with each other. We saw this 2 years ago. When the Eagles start losing, they start losing big, and it kind of feels like they're getting into that trap, that the kind of negative trap where each defeat feeds on the other, and each performance is a little bit less convincing than the one before. I mean, offensively, this was just pretty terrible from the Eagles. Okay, the running game was working. Got to give credit there. Saquon had a very solid game, but the passing game, I mean, it's four interceptions in one game from a guy who was, a Super Bowl MVP. Kind of, it's a very bad place to be. And they were just a mess. Otherwise, I mean, they just couldn't really get anything going on the passing side. And given that their defense was playing quite well, I mean, they really were limiting what Herbert could do in the passing game. They were getting a lot of aggression in terms of the sacks of Herbert and stuff, and they weren't allowing a tremendous amount on the running game either. I mean, this was a game where the Eagles' defense was almost winning this game on their own, but the offense just couldn't get out of their own way, and in particular hurts. And it does speak to a tendency sometimes with this Eagles team to kind of coast on their talent, and they kind of feel like, oh, we've got so much ability, we don't really need to plan for how to win these kinds of games. And it's just a mess. And I'm beginning to wonder now, are we starting to see a 2023 Eagles thing? We're just going to start losing games en masse. They're still at the top of their division. They're still theoretically in a very strong place. They have a game and a half leave on the Cowboys, but I don't know if I trust them at this point to hold on to it. I kind of feel like they can maybe get into a bit of a bad place going forward. I mean, the schedule is not that hard. Aside from the Bills, they have a pretty easy enough run in.
Yeah, I
But
think they have the
there are no
Commanders
easy
twice,
games when
don't
you
they?
Commanders twice and they have the Raiders. So, but
Yeah,
there are
yeah.
no easy games when you play this badly. Like there are no easy games when you play this badly. So for the Eagles, I mean, I think we've talked to death at this point about this team just not living up to its potential, and in many ways, maybe winning the Super Bowl was like the worst thing that could happen to the Eagles because it vindicated Sirianni and the other coaches and allow them to stick around longer than perhaps they otherwise should have merited. For the Chargers, it's very I kind of still baffled by the Chargers this year. I think I called them once in a previous podcast that they're like the worst good team I've ever seen. They're good. They're winning games. They've got a lot of talent, but everything is so goddamn ugly with the Chargers,
Mm.
and they never win a game well. They play down to the level of their opponents, or in this situation, even though the opponents are good or playing badly, they play down to it as well. You can't very hard to have any faith that the Chargers are going to do all that well going forward. And I hate to see them run up against a good team in the playoffs, as happened last year when they kind of just fell apart at the first good team that they faced. So neither of these teams am I particularly in love with. I think the defenses on both sides are a little bit stronger than the offenses right now. But that said, I would rather be in the Chargers position where you're winning even though you're not particularly playing well, than whatever the mess that is happening in the Eagles are. I think the Eagles need to turn this around pretty quickly, or the knives will be out, and the stabbings in the back will begin, and we'll be right back where we were 2 years ago with the Eagles, with a team that just hates everyone else, and everyone wants everyone else out of the locker room. And for a team that's talented, I mean, I thought they would walk this season, but because it's the Eagles, it's just nothing's ever easy with this team, and we're starting to see what that means in reality.
Yeah, I'll give the last word on this to Chargers head coach Jim Harbaugh, who said, when asked what he thought about the team's win over the Eagles, he said, "I'd put it in the discussion of the birth of my seven children, my marriage, in the conversation. It's just joyful, joyous, and the biblical definition of that is just overflowing with joy." Jim Harbaugh,
It's week 14, Jim.
you are
It's week
fucking
14.
insane. Next up, Sean, a very exciting game in the tundra. Cincinnati at Buffalo, 34-39. Tell us about this one.
Yeah, we love a good snow game. There's very little in the NFL that beats the proper chaos of a proper snow game when everybody is just miserable and cold and making mistakes, and the conditions are unplayable. You don't know you don't can't really trust to kick a ball. You can't always trust to throw a ball all that well, and it's just the animal nature of players kind of take over. This was a real chaotic game. Bills looked like they were in an absolute mess. 10 points down into the fourth quarter. the Bengals were cruising offensively. The Bills defense, the bad version of the Bills defense, had turned up, and it looked like they were going to suffer another terrible defeat that really would have put a big X into their season hopes of even making the wild card. But they found a way to win. They found a way to score 21 points in that fourth quarter, thanks in part to Joe Burrow just completely losing his brain for two plays. And on the other side, Josh Allen, well, he just did Josh Allen things, the kinds of things we come to expect from him. He was 22 of 28 for 258 and three touchdowns. He also had 78 yards and a touchdown rushing, and he was just there were moments where he was just winning. He was just scoring touchdowns on his own, and that was enough. Nice games as well. That both the tight ends, Knox and Kincaid, had very big games. Knox 93 yards, James Cook at 111 yards all-purpose. The run game was kind of a big part of what was going on, but the offense saved the Bills here because those two interceptions. You take those two interceptions off the board completely. This was just a horrendous defensive display by the Bills, and this defense still looks very, very shaky against good offenses. And I just don't think it's a viable, permanent game plan to be, well, our offense is good enough that it doesn't matter how bad our defense is, because that's just not going to win you anything, Sean McDermott. And they really need to solve these defensive problems pretty fucking quickly. For the Bengals, I mean, Joe Burrow was having a day. He was having a Joe Burrow day, and it really looked like there were flashes here. It was like, oh my God, the Bengals are going to do the impossible, winning their division at 9-8 and sneaking into the playoffs thing again. He's 25 of 36, 284, and four touchdowns in the end, but back to back horrendous interceptions where he just couldn't get the ball over the
Yeah.
defender that was coming towards him. The Benford pick six was particularly bad. He basically just gave the ball to Christian Benford to run it in for the pick six, and then Epineza on the very next play on a tipped pass. That was a deciding factor in the game. It switched from a 10-point deficit for the Bills to a 4-point lead, and then they just cruised the rest of the way. Higgins, despite being a little bit injured, 92 yards, two touchdowns. I thought he was quite impressive. Mike Gesicki made an appearance. He had his best game of the season by some distance, 86 yards and a touchdown. And yeah, it really kind of fits in well with what the Bengals are trying to do. So offensive. So again, it's the same thing with the Bills. The Bengals have a great offense, but this defense is just not at the races, and kind of got exposed here. The Bengals are 4-9 now, done for the season, which is a shame because I think this game does show that had Burrow been healthy all season, they could have been competitive. They could have made it quite interesting, and the AFC is kind of wide open. It does kind of feel like it could have been a Bengals season
Yeah.
had things come out in a different way, but not to be. For the Bills, they're 9-4. They're still theoretically can nab their division because they do play the Pats next week. But I think ultimately a wild card road trip looks more likely, and I just don't know if that's the path to the Bills to the Super Bowl. As I've talked about multiple times, winning three road games may not be what the Bills can do, especially with this defense, because they're going to have to win playoff games 42-41 in order to progress, and I just can't see that happening. So fun teams, great offenses, chaotic defenses, chaotic conditions, a very fun game, but ultimately one team is eliminated and the other team I just don't think I can take them seriously as Super Bowl contenders.
Yeah, I think their only hope would be if they were to beat New England next week and then hope that the weird magic about New England and the Dolphins strikes again because like Ravens, Jets, Dolphins are the rest of your games. They'd need you to drop another game, and that's going to be, I think, a bit of an ask. But we will be talking about New England in the previews anyway. Yeah, look, this was about as entertaining a game as we could have asked for. Two quarterbacks at the top of their powers, dueling it out, both having quite a fun time doing it as well. The Cincinnati defense looked a bit stronger at the start. They kind of, held them back, held them to a field goal, and so on. And then it just kind of Josh Allen said, "No, no, 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 we're not going to have this happen again," and just started bawling out. It's just I thought it was very funny when you were saying the whole Buffalo say, well, we can just have a good enough offense and we don't need a defense. Like I was just thinking Spider-Man meme of both these teams pointing at each other because that's pretty much been the Cincinnati Bengals approach for the last 4 years. It's disappointing for Cincinnati because it did feel overall that they had played the better game. It was just as you say, those two killer interceptions, particularly the one that came off the kickoff from the previous interception, the Epinesa, and that was just like just immediately hand the ball back to them. Like it was infuriating, I'm sure, for the Bengals fans to watch. But overall, this was just really, really fun to watch. I think the defining play for me in it was down at the end. It was 34-39. The Bills had the ball. They had a 3 yard run and then they got sacked. Like the defense for the Bengals stepped up, got the sack, put them in 3rd and 15. There's 2 minutes left on the clock, or 1:55 left on the clock, and the Cincinnati are out of timeouts. And what does Josh Allen do? They just hit the button and say, Josh, go do your thing, and he scrambles for 17 yards to pick up the first down and just kill the game. And like this is, it's not easy scrambling in this type of weather. And Josh Allen in this game was just his ability to evade the rush and find players like 8, 10, 11 seconds into a play. There was one, it was his touchdown pass where he ran around, should have gotten sacked twice, got out to the far right hand side, and threw an absolute dart through the hands of two or three receivers to find his guy in the end zone. And I just kind of said, well, if he's going to put in that kind of performance, I don't know what the Bengals are going to have to do on the other side to be able to beat him, because it was great. And you're dead right, John. God, it would be fun to have this Cincinnati Bengals team in the playoffs because I think they'd be great crack. And I'd love to see the offense playing like this against a better defense. I'd love to see what level it's actually at because this is a poor defense for Buffalo, and defenses tend to not do great in the snow because they have to do more, reactive movements, which means they're more likely to slip and so on. Although you'd think at this stage Buffalo would be better at that, given it's in theory their home field advantage. But yeah, for Buffalo, keeps the hope alive. They're probably going on the road. This kind of offensive performance will help them, but their defense needs help. For Cincinnati, yeah, if only Flacco had won one more game, I suppose that's all you can really say.
Think about the collapse was against the Jets or whatever, and they were 2 touchdowns up,
Oh
and
yeah,
that
good
was
God.
that was the
Yeah.
moment where the season went.
Yeah. Do you know what I'd forgotten about this season? It was only when I looked at it. So the Broncos have jumped New England as being the 1 seed at the moment. And do
Hmm.
you know why that is, Sean?
I don't actually know.
Common opponents. New England on this incredible run lost to the Raiders. I'd
Yeah,
actually forgotten they had
yeah.
lost to the Raiders of all the fucking teams.
I
Jesus.
think that was week one,
Yeah.
back, yeah, back in the before time.
Shocking
Yeah.
stuff. Next up, we have Houston at Kansas City, 20-10. Look, this is missed opportunities for Kansas City. Just kind of cost them this one in what was a very kind of tense defensive matchup. And by missed opportunities, we got, they missed a field goal. Thornton had a touchdown that was batted out with one of, like, just an incredible punch from the defensive back in the end zone. Hunt dropped a ball on kind of a quick dump off screen that he was going to be kind of free to the end zone in. And yeah, look, the defense has stepped up on both sides in this one. The Chiefs playing without McDuffie for most of this game after he left with a knee injury. And, for the Chiefs side, defense played very well. They got 3 sacks, 10 quarterback hits. And yeah, like it was just they kept them in it, and then there was just some terrible decision making. So they were 4th and 1 in the fourth quarter. Uh, Kareem Hunt has been nails on this down. They've already done it twice, I think, in this game with him in different formations. And Andy decides to do what we've been complaining about for the last while. He goes into shotgun. He decides to not have a running back on the field. I think he had was it Worthy doing some kind of weird wheel route out of the back instead? And yeah, just obviously it doesn't work at all. And it turned over. The game was 10-10 at that point, and it was the right decision to go for it for certain. But the problem is just the play calling in that kind of situation has been a problem for Andy Reid and the offense for most of the season. Now, whether you think it's Andy Reid or whether you think it's Matt Nagy, that's up to yourselves. But yeah, I just think it was like, what was that call? And we also had the interception that kind of ended it was the Kelsey one where he had a ball in his hands, fumbled it up in the air, basically passed it to the defensive back, which is kind of a sad note for what might be his last season, I would imagine. Mahomes' stat line in this one was a lot uglier than it actually was in the game when you were watching, but like you could see he'd lost some confidence in some of the receivers. He was the top rusher in this game. Now he was putting the team on his back quite a bit, but it just wasn't working out. Stroud was mostly contained in this one. He went 15 completions for 203 yards, touchdown, and took 3 sacks. And the defense also kept their run game quiet, 2.3 yards per carry. But The three interceptions of Mahomes was kind of enough to make the difference in this one. And Collins had a big day. He went four for 121 yards. The Chiefs are going to be looking to next season now, trying to work out. Well, look, I'm sure internally they're still going to be like, well, there's still a chance, and whatever it is, like 6% or 10% chance. But they need to win their games and they need other results to go their way because it's the wrong side of a lot of tiebreakers. So this is kind of the end of Kansas City in the playoffs run for quite some time. It'll no longer be true that the AFC Championship game is the shortest season that he'll have had. Houston looking up at the Jags after this one, sensing because like this is a championship level defense. This is great. Like they could have a lot of fun. CJ Stroud was contained more than he was in the previous game, but like their offense is definitely more dynamic with them under center. They seem to be growing in confidence quite a bit, and to be fair, a lot of that is just down to the Chiefs' defense playing quite well in this one. Spags sent a lot of blitzes. The difference between this week and last week is it was working a lot more. They were getting the quicker pressures that they wanted. There was some poor refing decisions in this stuff. Like there's the Pietri hit was just horrendous. Like he just charged head first into a receiver into the helmet and nothing got called. I'm very confused by that, but realistically, the Chiefs did this to themselves with just mistakes, sloppiness, and just failure to put the right call in at the right time. Because we saw it at times they were slinging it, they was there for the taking, and they just couldn't get it over the line. And yeah, it's unfortunate, but hey, sometimes you have to have a down year. And for Houston, you're still not quite fully there, but you've got a defense that would scare most other teams in the AFC. I'd say they're probably good for at least a wild card at this stage. And I'll tell you something, I wouldn't want to be the team playing them.
Yeah, sometimes you just have a down year, and with those words, did a dynasty fall? Yeah, I mean, the Chiefs were. It's such a strange experience watching the Chiefs after whatever the 10 years of kind of limitless success, and it's always been they've always got things done when it mattered and when it really counted and they needed to execute. This was a team that was built upon its execution of plays that it would do the thing that had to be done at the moment it had to be done, and they just kept doing it and doing it until they'd won Super Bowls. And this game was just the opposite of that. The Chiefs' offense in particular was just not executing anything. The O line was just an utter mess. Now, obviously, injuries have a big thing to say with that, and Mahomes just couldn't really survive that kind of situation he was in. I mean, the stat line, as you say, is just about the ugliest Mahomes stat line in history. If a if a rookie came to me with 14 of 33 for 160 yards and three interceptions, we'd be talking about benching him for the rest of the season. So it's yeah, and the Travis Kelce thing. I mean, aside from the kind of the high profile mistakes, it's the one catch for 8 yards, and you're probably the most important game of the season at that stage. Just kind of speaks to how much he's declined as a player and how much maybe he just needs to shuffle off into his comfortable retirement as Mr. Swift. But yeah, so I mean, I do expect that this Chiefs team, great coaches. Mahomes is a generational talent. They will rebuild and they'll come back next season and they'll be better. And perhaps we'll just look at this as a blip. But it will be interesting to see next year, can they get the momentum back? Because it does feel like this season has been just one long hangover to their Super Bowl blowout. And they've never quite been able to turn that corner back around, get that confidence back, get that momentum back, and get back into their kind of dynasty groove. For the Texans, yeah, I mean, the defense is lights out amazing. There's no question about that. This is a really, really tough unit to do well against, and it's going to take them quite far, I think, when the chips are down. You just wish the offense was a little bit better, you know? And I have a really soft spot for CJ Stroud because his rookie season was an amazing thing to experience in real time. But he's really fallen off a cliff, and he's just not quite the player they needed. Quarterback, the developments are coming back. Nico Collins is having some good games, and in Woody Marks they've got a little bit of a running game coming together. But I just kind of feels like this defense of the quality the Texans have deserves a better offense to just kind of give them that last push all the way, because yeah, it kind of feels like they're going to get into like a divisional round and their defense is going to be locked down, but their offense is just not going to be able to score enough points to win the game. That kind of feels like how the Houston season is going to end. But yeah, I'll be happy to watch them until they do, and I do hope that the defense carries them as far as it will. But it just doesn't feel like they're quite at the pinnacle of the AFC yet because of those offensive weaknesses. So bit of a power shift in the AFC with the Chiefs coming down, Texans coming up. But yeah, you're right, Connor. I think just write it off. Come back next year with a proper receiving core that everyone is on the
Mm.
same page and is not spending half the season suspended. And this plus the Spags defense, they could definitely bounce back. But for now, just watch, just enjoy the Texans as a defensive experience, and it'll be interesting to see how far they go.
Oh yeah, and finally, Sean, the battle for the AFC North, Pittsburgh at Baltimore, 27-22. Tell us about this one.
Yeah, there was a time when Steelers versus Ravens was the must-watch game of any week that it came up and was a deciding factor in whether a team got a number one seed or whatever. And it just kind of speaks to how far both of these franchises have kind of fallen in recent years. That this was just a really it's just a scrappy game. This was a game between two teams that are not particularly good, but one of them has to win their division. And it looks like the Tomlin experience continues onwards. Pittsburgh well on course for 9-8, and that should be enough to win the division. Ravens, after bouncing back from their 1-5 start to make themselves contenders again, I just thought they were really poor in this game, especially offensively. I just thought it just was not working for the Ravens as much as it should do. Start with Pittsburgh. I thought Aaron Rodgers had probably his best game for Pittsburgh. Take a bit of a rest, come back, fight hard. He was 23 of 34, 284 and touchdown, and he even was willing to run for 2 yards for a touchdown himself. He also rescued himself from the weird interception slash fumble situation. I would have been interesting to see how the stat guys came that up. I happen to think it was a veteran thing. He happened to know if I just kneel down, the play is over. He just had that. I've played in this league for whatever 15 odd years, 20 odd years. I know if I could just get my knees on the ground, all the shit that is happening around my head doesn't matter anymore. And he managed to pull it off. Metcalf 148 had a kind of big splash plays and kind of get them in. The problem with the Steelers was the run game was just basically non-existent. 34 yards of total rushing, although they did have a couple of rushing touchdowns within that. And ultimately, Pittsburgh would have lost this game had it not been for the Isaiah Likely TD that we talked about in the news section being wiped out despite being a perfectly legitimate catch. In the end zone, but on such small margins do divisions hinge. For the Ravens, though, let's just get into this a bit. So Lamar was 19 of 35, 219, touchdown interception, 43 and on the ground with a touchdown. I just thought he was messy as hell. I just never really felt like they were in their groove. It felt like every yard and every first down the Ravens got here was a struggle. And they just had to fight for everything they were getting, and it's not like they were facing a particularly good defense from the Steelers' side. Good games for Zay Flowers, who, when they actually target him, does end up with getting multiple, 124 yards. But I feel he's underused in the system, and I feel like his talent could be better employed elsewhere. Derrick Henry got over the century mark in all-purpose yards as well. But I mean, what really speaks to this game being met scrappy is just offensive efficiency was just in the toilet. So third down efficiencies, Baltimore were 7 of 18, Pittsburgh were 6 of 14. Those are both pretty bad. Red zone efficiencies, Baltimore were 2 of 6 in the red zone, which is just horrendous. Pittsburgh were 2 of 4. It was just a very poor performance, especially offensively from both teams. Flashes from the occasionally good moments from players, but generally speaking, neither team really felt like they had a cohesive game plan on the offensive side for how to deal with it. Maybe that comes down to divisional rivals. They know each other very well. They can screw up each other's playbooks very well or whatever. But it just never felt like either's teams should be things that should be scared of. So one of these sides basically guaranteed to represent the AFC North in the playoffs. It looks likely now it'll be the Steelers, as I kind of thought it would be. Although that Week 18 game where they go back, I think it's Steelers Ravens in Pittsburgh, still potentially live situation. But I think no matter who gets, and I think only one team will get into playoffs, and I think no matter who it is, I don't think either the Ravens or the Steelers are going to make a big splash in the playoffs. I think the bigger beasts of the AFC, from your Bills and Pats and Broncos up, none of those teams are going to have too much problems dealing with whoever wins the AFC North, because neither of these teams, if they were in a tougher division, would probably even be finishing with a winning record, to be honest. But they get away with it. So, yeah. it was the AFC North messiness, but not combined with the quality of play, and so it was just a very blah game to watch, and ultimately one team had to win, and that was the Steelers.
Yeah, like you said, the Ravens are just are so inconsistent, so sloppy at times. Like, because they were getting movement. Like, if you look at their drives in the fourth quarter, they had a 10-play drive that went 54 yards and results in the field goal. Okay, that gets them within a score. It's 8 points. Then they have a 9-play drive, 50 yards, gets them a field goal. Okay, now it's 5 points. So you're there. And then you go 70 yards, 12 plays, and you turn it over on downs. And like I get the killer instinct and everything on that. I get the idea that, yeah, you want to knock these guys out, but you're down at the you're like I just you're down at the Pittsburgh 8. You could kick a field goal, make it a 2-point game, and rely on your defense, which by the way has held their last three drives to punts to get you there, and they don't trust it at all because like I have noticed that Rodgers tends to fall off a bit later on in games, and I think that might be an age wear and tear thing, or it might be that it's there's only so much in the playbook and they kind of use up everything they have. I don't know exactly what's causing it, but like just the lack of trust they had in their team to go and get it done, or maybe the over reliance and just thinking, oh yeah, sure we'll be able to punch this in, having failed three times on and goal distances to do it. Sorry, four times essentially to do it. It was just it's just quite poor really from it, and I've not been on the Ravens at all this season because I just kind of felt that something was off about them. And I know Lamar Jackson looks to be carrying an injury, but he did still move around a bit. Like he had 43 yards rushing in this in the touchdown. Like they are, I just don't think they know what they want to be. Zay Flowers has decent yardages in games, but isn't really the WR1. They don't really have a fantastically well built out passing setup for them. They do have a decent line, and maybe the problem is just that with Jackson being injured for parts of the season, and I think still injured at the moment, they can't utilize as much of his movement because like that's what we saw early on. They opened this game by sending him out on a designed run or two to try and force the guys to come back into the box to bring the safeties on down, and that's meant to open up your passing game, and we just didn't really see it work. Like maybe they don't see him as much of a running threat anymore or whatever it is, or maybe it's just Pittsburgh staying disciplined on the defense because the defense has been playing better of late and saying no, 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 that's what they want us to do kind of thing. But I just think it's getting a bit stale in Baltimore. And I talked about this in the off season beforehand, and it's a discussion probably for this off season. But like, are the Ravens at any point going to consider changing coaches? Like, do we think maybe we've had our run with Harbaugh because we've seen the problems he has when they get ahead in games because he doesn't really know how to manage that situation, and we've got a track record of that. We've got if your route A for how you want to run this offense isn't working, you don't really have an answer to how you want to run this offense, and then you've also got just Lamar Jackson is there. You hemmed and hawed as an organization for like 2 summers about giving him money, and now you've given him money, and all he's ever known is playing under this head coach, and you've not been able to get over the hump with them. And if anything, it's regressed this year. And maybe it's time to just go. Maybe we need to put a new head coach in here. Maybe we need someone who's a little bit more innovative on the offense, someone who can figure out how to get these things working. I think that might be the direction that they'll consider in this offseason. I know they have a lot of, respect for Harbaugh and he's been there forever, but like maybe sometimes that is the problem, Sean. Whereas on the Pittsburgh side, look, this has to work because it's ride or die. Last week they were calling to fire the head coach. Now Rodgers, I believe, in his press conference said, "What do you say to the people who are calling for the coach's head and yourself after last week?" He goes, "Hopefully you'll all shut up for a week." Like I think they're just kind of riding it out at the moment. Whereas Baltimore, this is a different flavor of the same ice cream, and at a certain point, I think they're going to want to stop eating it. So I don't know if it's going to cause widespread change, but I think maybe internally there's going to be some questions building around the coaching in there.
Yeah, I do feel it probably has reached the end of its time. I think that the John Harbaugh thing is kind of run out now. There's no fuel left in that particular fire. I think it is time to look elsewhere. But it is such a hard thing to do
Yeah.
when you have a winning coach. You know.
Well, this is the thing. Like, this is the problem for both of these teams is that they've got winning coaches who seem to have plateaued, and they don't seem to be any closer to getting over the hump than they were beforehand. So, look, I suppose it's all to do with organizational philosophy and whatnot. But if I was Baltimore, I'd be thinking, do we want to get a year or two of the prime of our fancy quarterback with an innovative offensive mind? Because that might not be the worst idea in the world given what you've done so far isn't working. But yeah, as we say, all games are important, just some games are less important, and for those, we put them in the dump off. So first up, Dallas at Detroit, 30-44. A get right game for Detroit. The defensive turnovers, two interceptions, a fumble, and five sacks. And it was a big run day that kind of won it for them. Gibbs had three touchdowns. Montgomery averaged 10 yards a carry. Goff was solid, 309 yards and a touchdown, but nothing too exciting. It slowed down in the second half. The game got to within 3 points, but then they said, "Oh, hold on, we can't let this happen," and they pulled away again. Dallas were quite sloppy. Dak had 376 yards and a touchdown, but had two interceptions, and the run game never really got going, averaging 3.8 yards a carry. Their improved defense has gone quiet. They only got one sack in this game, and their big problem was there were just too many times they were settling for field goals over touchdowns. If you're going to be defined as being a big superstar offense, it doesn't matter if both CD and Pickens go over 100 yards. You need to be converting those things into touchdowns, particularly when you're playing a Detroit team that can put up points. Tennessee at Cleveland next, 31-29. The Browns came so close in this game, and Sanders had a great one, but they took him off the field for the 2 point conversion to try and tie it up, and it just didn't work for them. Sanders went 23 of 42 for 364 yards, three touchdowns, an interception, but he also had 30 yards rushing and a touchdown on the ground. This will really liven up all of his online fans that are going to just be yapping throughout. The run game was really bad this week, though, for some reason, down to 2 yards per carry when you just look at the running backs on their own, and they had a fumble. Ward on the other side looked really bleh, 117 yards, two touchdowns and an interception, but they were able to lean on Tony Pollard for a big day. He carried the ball 25 times for 161 yards and two touchdowns. This is, it was a game between two also rounds. The Browns probably should have had it, to be honest, with how they were playing on average. Tennessee get a big win here. They were overjoyed on the back of probably the worst of Ward's performances, or at least certainly like bottom three of his performances this year. But a win's a win, and I suppose maybe takes him out of contention for the first overall. Washington at Minnesota, 0-31. Wow, it just got worse for Washington. Daniels re-injured after an initial poor 3 quarters that he played. Mariota came in to replace him and promptly threw an interception and fumbled the ball in relief, so it didn't get much better for them. The run game was working for them, like they were getting success on the ground, but because they were so far down, they just had to move away from the run because they needed to score quick. JJ had his first non-interception game since coming back from the injury. He still looked shit though. 16 completions, 163 yards, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions. He had 4 sacks in this. They had solid run support, 4.8 yards a carry and a touchdown. Ultimately, a very, very uninspiring game. Minnesota are championing this as a great achievement. I think Washington looked like they were done with this season about 5 minutes into this game, full stop, and I wouldn't be able to take anything away from this other than Minnesota are slightly better than Washington at the moment, and I think most teams would be. New Orleans at Tampa Bay, 24-20. Shuck got his wheels going, 2 rushing touchdowns in this one, and starts asking the question of New Orleans, could he be the future? Do they need to get a replacement quarterback? His passing was quite mid in this game, 144 yards and an interception, but it was a very, very bad weather day. Like, that was a performance that was better than what Baker Mayfield managed to pull out. Neal looked good at running back, 70 yards and a touchdown. Nothing too explosive in it, but, they didn't get their pass rush home at all in this. Their defense weren't up to stuff. And again, look, the pitch pitch conditions on this one were terrible. All of the broadcast kept focusing in on how torn up the turf was. It was going to be hard to get footing on. Tampa Bay on the other side, it was just not great. They had a lot of drops. The run game wasn't really working. It was just sloppy for them, and they're just watching the division slip between their fingers. Like, they went for it on fourth down 7 times in this game and only got 2 of them. It was rough. 2 of those actually were in the fourth quarter as well. So like, they kept fighting for it, but they just weren't executing. Baker at least doesn't look like the injury was causing him too much hassle, which solves a bigger problem for them to a certain extent. But if you can't get past the New Orleans Saints when you're at home, that causes a whole new set of questions. Seattle at Atlanta next, 37-9, getting their asses beaten. The Falcons. Talk about two cousins. Actually, I'll talk about one cousin. He had 50% completion, 162 yards and 2 interceptions. It was awful. Bijan is meant to be the engine of his offense. He was completely contained. His longest play of the game was 11 yards. Sean's favorite player in the league, Kyle Pitts, went for 90 yards. He was the top receiver. And a lot of news stories out there about how he's eyeing up free agency and he's going to get paid an awful lot of money. I don't know about that, but we'll see. I think he'd be interesting.
By who?
I would say, Sean, there might be a chance, if it's not a crazy amount of money, the Kansas City Chiefs will be looking for a pass-catching tight end, and that would be kind of a nice second spot. Also, something kind of nice about Atlanta sending us a tight end that goes on to be really good, seeing that we did them a solid with Tony Gonzalez back in the early 2000s. 2 Seattle running backs in this one went over, had that, like, when we're talking explosive plays, because, you know, I'm kind of saying like Bijan was contained, they didn't get the explosives. Both Seattle running backs had explosive plays in this, going over 25 yards on a single play. JSN, you know, slowed his pace a little bit, only 92 yards and a touchdown in this one. Not quite up to his exacting standards, but still very impressive. But this Seattle team, even in a 37-9 routing of an opponent, they have the same problems we've talked about for a few weeks. They're just not quite crisp in the red zone. 2 out of 4 ended up in touchdowns. Like, they didn't need it here. They didn't need to be inventive. They didn't need to be explosive. They didn't need to pull anything out of the playbook that they want to keep secret to themselves, but they certainly would in a bigger game. And it is worrying me just how much this offense starts to stutter once it gets into scoring positions. Sam Darnold went for 249 yards, but, you know, not really looking killer at the moment. Seattle power on ahead, but I still think they need a little bit more killer instinct, which is weird to say when you win by over 30 points. Indianapolis, Jacksonville, 19-36. Jags laying down a marker even before Jones went out with the injury. They held Taylor to very, very little in this game. 3.5 yards a carry. His longest rush was 14 yards. There was no pass in this game from the Indianapolis side that went over 12 yards. Gave up 2 interceptions, a fumble, a safety, a turnover on downs. It was just sloppy throughout. The Jags on the other side looked great. It was a good game for Trevor Lawrence. 244 yards and 2 touchdowns. They had 100 yards and 2 touchdowns on the ground. The defense got 2 interceptions. They only got 1 sack, but, you know, they held them down and they beat them silly. Like I said, this was contain, and it worked. You know, they've maybe got 1 loss left on the schedule. I think Broncos are probably the only real tough matchup that they have coming. So the Texans are going to need to run the table if they want to try and catch up with them. Like, this Jags team, we can see what they can be. Like, in a performance like this, you're like, oh yeah, these guys can be quite formidable. The problem is, do you trust the consistency coming out of them? And that's what they're going to have to answer. Miami at the Jets next, 34-10. Tyrod left this one in the first quarter very early on with a groin injury, I believe it was. Undrafted rookie Brady Cook took over, went 14 for 30, 163 yards and 2 interceptions, and that's essentially all she wrote. The only bit of excitement for the Jet side was a punt return touchdown that gave them some hope. They were down 21-0. It became 21-7, and they didn't get anything else until the field goal later on. There's 6 sacks and 3 interceptions for the Miami defense, so they were all over this game. Achan left injured after putting up a 7 carries for 92 yards and a touchdown stat line. Thankfully, the news is that it's nothing serious, and that if it had been a closer game, he could have come back in if needs be. Wright stepped in and handled it completely fine. 24 carries, 107 yards and a touchdown. Not explosive like Achan is, but is very much a solid kind of pounder. Miami win despite essentially not passing anymore. A fun side note for anyone who's keeping an eye on Miami at the moment: Miami's entire game plan for the last 4 or 5 weeks, maybe even longer, has been to utterly minimize the quarterback usage and minimize the amount of passing they are. And it feels very much like what they are doing is road testing the idea of what will we look if we don't have Tua. I would expect Tua's gone after this year, and I think everything they're doing in the game planning suggests they are just trialing what that looks like. Denver at Vegas next, 24 to 17. This marks 10 wins in a row for the Broncos, but they made an absolute meal of this one. They felt in complete control of the game throughout, but just couldn't close the deal, couldn't put the points in, couldn't shut down the Raiders. Smith left in the third quarter with an injury. I believe he cut his hand, and also something happened to his shoulder that it started to seize. So he was replaced by Kenny Pickett, who led a touchdown drive and then a field goal drive. And that confuses me, Sean, because this is a game that ended up 24 to 17, and for some reason, to close the game, they kicked a field goal. Now, there's a lot of conspiracy theories about this because I believe was it was
They
hitting the
covered the
number
spread.
that would cover the point spread or something like that. But like,
Yeah.
the idea that you would send a kicker out to kick a field goal in that position is bizarre. Now they've come out since and said, oh, well, Pete Carroll claims that he was arguing that there should be 8 seconds left on the clock and then he's going to kick the field goal and then go onside or something. But at the point you're kicking the field goal, you know that that's not happening. Like, you know that they're not putting 8 seconds on the clock, so it doesn't make any sense to me. Knicks looked very weird in this game, like very very boring. Didn't do very much at all. Like, the Denver looked at this game, said, well, let's not risk anything. Let's just go all run. So they ran it 31 times for 152 yards and 2 touchdowns. Both sides were actually played pretty clean in this game. It got over relatively quickly, which is nice. But yeah, it was not the most impressive win from Denver, but a win's a win, and 10 in a row was very impressive, full stop. Finally, the Rams at Arizona, 45 to 17. It was very nice to have a game that I didn't have to pay too much attention to. They absolutely steamrolled them. This is 530 yards and 314 yards on offense. It was 45 to 10 in the fourth quarter. Stafford had 22 of 31 for 281 yards and 3 touchdowns. Blake Corum had 12 rushes for 128 yards and 2 touchdowns. Williams 84 yards and a touchdown as well. And bizarrely, those aren't even the most impressive players in the game. Nakua was just again on absolute fire. 7 catches, 167 yards and 2 touchdowns. Like, it was brilliant. Arizona looked exactly like they have in every other game so far. Just happened to be playing a better team, so they have a good level of completions. Their run game is underwhelming. Wilson, the tight end, there's 11 catches for 142 yards and 2 touchdowns, and their defense were no shows. There was no sacks, there was no tackles for a loss. Like, this is deeply grim reading from the defensive side. So we know what the Arizona offense looks like. It's boring. It's a lot of high completion percentage throws from Brissett and so on. But the defensive side is just no showing entirely in this game. You got to look at this Arizona and think that it's going to be a house cleaning, right? They got to get rid of this coaching staff, get rid of this quarterback, and so on. The media seems to think it's not, but I don't know. So keep an eye on that. And that'll do us for this week. Let's go and have a look at the games for next week. Okay, so first up, Sean, we have Thursday Night Football, Atlanta at Tampa Bay. I've gone for Atlanta. You guys have gone for Tampa Bay. You may notice I have a couple of strong choices in this week. It's because I am now 13 picks behind in the in the predictions. I did not have a good week
Yeah.
last week at all. Normally, I would work out what picks I should make by literally during this section arguing with you guys about what team is the better team and then making an informed decision. But I was all on my own last week, so I made some terrible choices.
Yeah, I'm not gonna point out how few games you got right last week, but let's move on.
Hey,
Yeah,
hey,
so
hey, 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 hey.
NFC South battle. The Falcons are eliminated. Obviously, the Bucks are doing their damnedest to not win this division after quite a quick start to the season. It does seem to be kind of falling apart for the Bucks a little bit. I'm not quite sure where to put the finger on it. I mean, for a while there, it seemed to be injuries was their problem, but now they've got Bucky Irving back in the running game. They've got Godwin back, although you might not be playing this one. They've got Ibuka. It feels like the Bucks should be powering on, and yet they had a very bad loss in a pretty poor performance against the Saints, albeit in weather conditions that were not optimal. But now they're in a bit of trouble. The Bucks are in terms of their division. I mean, I think they are. I think they're behind They're level with the Panthers now. I don't know. I can't remember who has the deciding in terms of the tiebreak. But they can't keep losing games. They really need this one as a win. You kind of feel the Falcons, good bad Falcons has kind of just evaporated, and now we've kind of just getting bad Falcons. I think a lot of that got to do with the fact that they're back in the situation where they have been a few times, which is not quite sure how to make the offense work. Part of that is Cousins, I think, is not quite where he needs to be. But also, I mean, things like, for example, that Bijan Robinson isn't being able to find his groove as well as he could before, or that they're relying so heavily on Kyle Pitts. These are all signs that your offense is not working if those are the things that are popping up. So I think the Falcons, there's just no real reason to back them other than you're trying to gamble to pick up a few wins here or there. I think even though the Bucks are in a bad place, it's a home game. They gotta win it. It's a divisional opponent, so they'll have a good sense of them in terms of the playbook. I think the Bucks have to win this one, and I think they'll get it out. But if they lose this one, then yeah, it does look like the Panthers might sneak in and claim that division despite not being a particularly good team. But the NFC South, man, it just keeps giving with the mediocrity sometimes.
Yeah, my pick is mostly based on Atlanta were dog shit last week, so I'm expecting them to be good this week. Tampa Bay's defense aren't anywhere near the Seahawks defense, and I'm gonna rely on Bijan to do something in a game where Tampa Bay just seem out of sorts. Into the early window, Baltimore at Cincinnati. Myself and yourself, Sean, have gone for Cincinnati. Ronan has gone for Baltimore. Yeah, look, Cincinnati look exciting and fun. Baltimore look badly broken. We've discussed both teams kind of already in the reviews from last week, but like the Cincinnati offense, like the the fun that they have left because they not going to be able to make the playoffs at this stage. I think they're not technically eliminated, but like I think it would require draws or something like that. Essentially, they can just go around now and play spoiler to the teams in their division, try and piss off everyone. And I I just don't trust this Baltimore team at all at the moment, so I'm gonna side with Cincinnati. For Ronan's perspective, I can get it. The Cincinnati defense did nothing last week. Baltimore should be able to move a little bit better on them. They can just rely on Henry an awful lot better. You'd expect to see, Jackson will be another week away from that injury, although I don't think it's actually fully gone yet. But yeah, look, Cincinnati are fun. I enjoy watching them, so I'm going to enjoy watching this game. Vegas at Philadelphia, Sean. We're going Philly getting back on track.
Yeah, to go from a game that'll be fun to watch to a game you couldn't pay me to watch. Raiders are just a terrible team. The Pete Carroll thing is just it just has never clicked at all. It feels like they're just kind of filling out space. I think they are now officially the worst team in the NFL in terms of their record. I think they're top of the line to get that draft pick. So there's no real reason to believe the Vegas Raiders can win this, other than the fact that they're playing a team in Philadelphia who've lost three straight and have a history of meltdowns when the team gets on a losing streak. Very ugly performance, especially offensively from the Eagles, as we talked about against the Chargers. But I mean, even given how bad they are in terms of their self belief and the momentum, and even how badly the coaching is doing at the moment, surely to God, the Eagles have enough just talent, even just on the defensive side. Like their defensive talent alone might be enough to kind of beat the Raiders. Given how poorly the Raiders have been playing this season, but yeah, it's very difficult to see a scenario, even if the Eagles are in a very bad place, where they just don't, by sheer force of will, just have enough talent on the field that they will just make enough plays to win this game. It's just hard to see how the Raiders can win one when I just don't even know what their paths to victory really are. So I think the Eagles to
Uh,
win this. Go on if you have theories on it,
I've got
but
I've, I've, I've I've got I've got one path to victory. So there's a chance that the Raiders will be starting their backup quarterback, right? Kenny Pickett revenge game.
um
He
sure.
played he played for Philly.
Did he briefly? I
He's
don't
a
know.
backup
Yeah.
to the incumbent starter Jalen Hurts and beat out Tanner McKee.
Right. Wow. I think it's stretching the concept of a revenge game just a tiny bit, but
At the end of the NFC Championship game, Pickett was subbed in for Hurts just to take the knees.
wow, that's a humiliation you don't get you don't get
No.
past very easily. He's probably been stewing about that one. Yeah,
He was
ever
he was he was with
since.
them last year. Like he was on he's got a Super Bowl ring from them from last year. He was the backup quarterback.
Wow. Yeah, yeah,
But yeah, no, yeah, no, they're not gonna win. Like they can't. It'll be like Jalen Hurts is playing poorly, but like Max Crosby cannot just ruin him every single play.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Arizona, Houston up next. We've gone for Houston across the board. Why? Because they are good and Arizona are terrible. Like I said, Arizona are at the will you fire everyone or just most people stage of the season, whereas Houston are. They don't even care about this game. They are going to play it in a fugue state, unaware that Arizona have come to their hometown, and they will just be watching the Jags play alongside this game happening. If Houston drop this one, like it'd be baffling, frankly. But yeah, I just don't see how Arizona have the dogs to do anything in this one. This could be an incredibly low scoring game. Sean, you've got the. I was hemming and hawing about maybe taking this as my pick of the week, but because I think it should be quite a fun one. Chargers at Chiefs. Myself and Ronan have gone for the Chiefs. You've gone for the Chargers.
Yeah, I always used to look forward to Chargers Chiefs games because they tend to be quite exciting games. For some reason, these teams seem to click well together in terms of making fun games. And obviously, I think it was week two, they had a very fun game, which kind of gave us a sense that the Chargers might be an interesting team to watch this year. Obviously, things have gone a little bit differently for both teams, to be honest, since then. The Chiefs have never really been able to get out of second gear, and now they're looking at missing the playoffs, which would be a very big step down from where they've been in recent years. And the Chargers, even though they're winning games, even though they're probably going to make the playoffs, are just an ugly ass team, and they just win in the most unconvincing ways imaginable. So I mean, I can definitely see why you'd back the Chiefs. The Chiefs have nothing to lose at this point. They may as well, pull out all the secret plays they've been saving for the playoffs and just throw them out there and just try and make something work. Try and get this offense into some sort of groove because they're going to need to win out at the very least, and have things go their way in other ways as well. And that starts with a win here. And they do tend to beat the Chargers more often than they lose to them. So there's a reason to believe the Chiefs should have kind of a sense of superiority here. But yeah, the Chargers just find ways to win game at the moment. It's kind of weird. They've kind of started to do the Chiefs thing where they don't necessarily always play that well, but they just seem to win games even though they don't necessarily deserve to. I feel that it'll be a divisional game where both sides know each other well. The Chargers have a win on the Chiefs based earlier in the season. I think it'll depend an awful lot on how well the Chargers defense does. It's been quite a bit improved, except that their run defense is still has weaknesses, and it'll be interesting to see if the Chiefs try and expose that. But their pass defense has improved quite a considerable amount in the last few weeks. So I'd be interested to see how that works. But for me, it's I go for the Chargers because they're the team that's most live, the team that most needs the win, and the team that perhaps has higher self belief at the moment, especially since Jim Harbaugh is riding the most amazing win ever in
Yeah.
Week 14 against the Eagles. So I'll back them, but it could go either way. But I'll back the Chargers because they need the win more, and I just don't think the Chiefs. This will probably be the official end of their season. Will be this defeat.
Yeah. Whereas I think fuck the Chargers. No, I do quite enjoy how they're playing at the moment. I think McDuffie's availability will be important to this one. Because yeah, other than that, they've got quite a slow defensive backfield at the moment, and Spags does like to send the blitz, particularly if he knows that the quarterback is still recovering from an injury. Next up is your pick of the week, Sean. Big one for your division, big one for your Patriots. Buffalo heading down for the rematch at New England, and you've decided to turncoat. Myself and Ronan are going for New
Yeah.
England, and you're going for Buffalo.
Yeah, the realist in me kind of stepped in there at the last moment and went, "Do I really believe this Pats team is going to be able to do the double over the Bills?" I mean, this is probably the most important game the Pats have played, arguably um, since Brady left them. This is the first time this team is back in a position where they're not just a playoff team, but they're potentially building something that could be a long-term dynasty thing. And there's a really big, who is the big dog in the AFC East here? The Pats have a two-game lead. This is a home game. This is their first chance to win the division in 5 years. This is a really big game for the Pats, and this is, let us remember, quite a young core. I mean, May obviously is only a few years into the league. Things like the rookie running back Henderson and stuff. There's this even Vrabel is not all that experienced in these kinds of high intensity games as a player, admittedly, but not necessarily as a coach. So it's going to be a thing where the Pats are going to have to fight against their own nerves. They're going to have to fight against their own expectant fans. And the Bills are a very tough team, especially offensively. Now, the weaknesses that the Bills have are on the defensive side. I think if the Pats are going to win, it's going to be because there's a game plan that allows Drake May to expose the problems in the Bills' defense. That the good combo of run and pass to kind of soften them up, and then maybe beat them with big plays when necessary. May might need to pull out a 300-yard game, which is not something that's necessarily in his locker at the moment to get that win. But certainly, if you're looking at the defenses, I think the Pats' defense is in a better place than the Bills' defense. The problem for me, though, is that the Bills have to win this game. Because if they want to have any chance of taking that division and getting that home playoff game, which I think they're going to need if they're going to get to the Super Bowl, they have to win this one. Josh Allen is a force of nature when they have to win. He will be going all out, and I know the Pats are having a great season, 11-2. I never thought they'd be in this spot. I just don't 100% buy into this team yet. I do buy a little bit into the weak schedule narrative that the Pats necessarily haven't beaten too many good teams this year, albeit they have beaten the Bills previously. I just kind of feel like the Bills will now have a little bit of tape on this current Pat's offense a little bit more. They might be able to scheme something up defensively, although that might be asking too much given where they're at. I just think it's a tough game in a situation that the Pats have less experience these kind of high profile games in their current iteration than the Bills do. The Bills have to win. Josh Allen is in imperious form at the moment, and even if the Pats have a plan to score against this Bills defense, I just feel the Bills offense, when they're in the zone, they can score 40 points. And maybe they'll have to, but that's the kind of reason I'm giving them the edge to win this one. And the Pats probably still will take the division, but this will make it a bit tougher, that particular road.
Yeah, look, I going for the Pats on this one. They're coming off a bye, so they're well rested. They know the tendencies of this team. They beat them already this season. They're at home for this one. I think their defense poses a much bigger problem to Buffalo than the defense of Cincinnati does. I think that their offense is less mistake prone. Like the Bills lose last week if there's not back-to-back interceptions, and the one of those interceptions you can maybe give to the Buffalo defense. One of them you have to definitely put on Joe Burrow. So if they can avoid that, then I think they should be okay. They've got a strong run game they can rely on, and I think Buffalo are particularly weak against that at the moment as well. And yeah, just build that out into play action. I'm with you entirely. Force of nature of Josh Allen and all that stuff, and I can see them being massively up for the game. I'm just more, you're rested, they're wrecked. You've got the strengths where they have weaknesses. You've got weaknesses where they don't necessarily have as much strength. I think it'll be close. And I just think I'm gonna back New England in this one. Next up, Jets at Jacksonville. We've gone for Jacksonville across the board. Yeah, look, the Jets are not in a great spot at all. They like this does feel kind of like the game that Jacksonville could drop in the whole Jacksonville being incredibly inconsistent and so on. But if they give us a performance even half of what they did this week just gone, like the Jets don't have the firepower to deal with that with all the injuries they're dealing with and so on. So we're going to back Jacksonville to continue their ascent up the AFC South, and they'll be keeping an eye on the Houston game. However, I think Jacksonville are going to have to focus in on this one because the Jets can be spicy if they get the right game plan in place, and maybe they will be able to scramble Trevor Lawrence a little bit, but I just think the talent on that roster will win out in the end. Washington at the Giants up next, Sean. We've gone for the Giants across the board, which is surprising because this is two poor teams, but I thought there would have been a little bit more consternation.
Well, I mean, what is there to like about the Commanders at this point? We saw in their performance last week that the offense is just not there. Particularly if Daniels is out injured again, there's just so little to like about where the Commanders are. Their defense doesn't seem to have particularly great strengths at the moment either. Whereas at least the Giants, I've talked about this a little bit before. The Giants are 2-11. They're having on paper a terrible season, but the vibes are really good. I mean, Jackson Dart will be starting in this one presumably. They have a self belief in themselves, and the interim head coach Kafka is having a lot of fun. They seem to just be in a good place. Whereas the Commanders, I think they just want the season to be over, and I kind of get the sense that this will happen. Maybe the first quarter will be competitive, but as soon as maybe the Giants go up by a touchdown or 10 points or something, the Commanders will just give up. And so I think the Giants ultimately, on the vibes, have enough to win this game. I just don't trust the Commanders to score many points anymore with under Mariota. But you obviously have a little bit of faith in them, given you just changed your pick on the spreadsheet.
Yes, I have. Yes, I have. The Giants have lost 7 straight games. They lost their season opener to the Commanders already. Mariota has been a serviceable backup when he's known that he's going into the game and they game plan for him and not Jaden Daniels because there's similarities but they are different skill sets. And yeah, I've just decided, like I said, I need to find a few spots where I have an edge and I think this is a close enough game are they both 2-11 at this point? Like they're both not very
No, I
good.
think the Commanders are 3-10, but they're
Okay,
yeah
yeah.
they're
So
pretty
I'm
close.
taking the better team. I'm taking the better team. But yeah, look, it's just like I just initially I was just kind of going, yeah, look, it's a really slow and old defense for Washington, and they're not going to be up to much. But then I was just kind of thinking through the Giants team, like, so Dart will be back and that'll be fine. But also, I think the shackles will be on Kafka with Dart in place. That like he's not to risk him. He's not allowed to do design runs. He's not allowed to do anything like that. Tyrone Tracy isn't lighting me up as the lead running back, and Singletary's an okay backup, but he's a bit old and stuff. And then like, who you throwing out? Like Wandale Robinson and Isaiah Hodgins. Like, I'll take Mariota and Terry McLaurin over that. And like Chris Rodriguez is a good running back. I imagine this will be a terrible low-scoring game. But hey, look, fuck it. Why not? I'll take a shot on the 3-10 team to beat the 2-10 team, or 3-9 team to beat the 2-10 team. Cleveland and Chicago. We've gone for Chicago across the board. Yeah, it's Chicago are impressive at the moment. They're not quite there. They're not a finished product. They're still evolving. Cleveland, on the other side, have been a little bit more exciting under Sanders. We talked about him having his best day as a passer last week. I think it's the raw numbers hide some of the stuff that's going on there. Like a chunk of that is yard after the catch. He makes some terrible decisions. He holds onto the ball for way too long for a guy who is as slow as he is, and that's a problem. Cleveland defense are really, really good, and I think they are going to pose some interesting questions to the Chicago team. And that's what I would find interesting in this game is to see how Chicago deal with this defense. Miles Garrett obviously is on the hunt for. I think does he have 2 sacks left to get, or is it three to get the record for
I think
most
it's
sacks?
still three. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And he will be hoping to pick up some of them here. Caleb Williams has been better at avoiding sacks, but he still has a tendency to occasionally go off script if his first read or two isn't open. That's kind of been getting better, but it's still there a little bit. But yeah, so I think it'll be interesting to see. I still think the Chicago team will win out. I don't like their defense, so I think maybe you might see some explosiony bits, like a couple of explosive plays at least from the Cleveland side. But they don't have consistency on the offensive side with Sanders. They've just got explosions occasionally. And I think over the course of a full game, it'll just end up being Chicago's game. Into the late window, Sean, Carolina at New Orleans. I've gone for New Orleans. You guys have gone for Carolina.
Yeah, somehow I've drawn both of the NFC South games this week.
Lucky
Fun
you.
times. Um, yeah, it's such a
To be
weird
fair,
division.
you assigned the games this week. You put the.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. Um, so yeah, it's such a weird division. The Panthers are kind of half a good team and half a really terrible team. It's odd that they've had a couple of stinkers this season, but they've also just slowly been improving and got a couple of scalps as well. It kind of feels like they're in a good place. They're just coming off a bye, just coming off a pretty good run of games where they
Jeez, they
had
beat the Rams. Jesus
the
Christ.
big win against the Rams. They beat the Packers not too many weeks ago. It's a team that's really coming into itself, and obviously with the Bucks kind of struggling, the division is wide open, and suddenly you're starting to think about this team as a playoff team. I am intrigued about the Saints, though, I have to say, and I can certainly understand why you picked them, whereas me and Ronan picked Carolina, because I do, and I have been saying this, I do think the Saints are sneakily getting a little bit better every week that they play. I think Kellen Moore and Brandon Staley were given a really bad, really a bad hand to play by the upper management, who are clearly in a rebuild and want to cut some salary cap, and we're just willing to let this team tank and die. And slowly but surely, Kellen Moore is building. He's got nothing to work with, but slowly and surely they're building something. They appear to
God,
have
household names like Shook and Neil.
they have the beginning of a running game. They might have now found something approaching maybe not a franchise quarterback, but a serviceable quarterback in Tyler Shook for a couple of years. So it's interesting. I mean, I certainly think they're not the easiest team to play, and of all the teams down there at the kind of 3-10, 2-11, they're one of the better teams with that record. And Carolina have a good defense, but they look they do have that Chargers thing where they are winning games, but they're not necessarily convincing in their performances when they do so. So, based on the fact that the Panthers have recently beaten the Rams, you kind of have to, in my mind,
Hmm.
back them to beat the Saints. I think logically those two things kind of have to go together. You kind of have to trust that the Panthers will be
Yeah.
able to put those performances back to back. But I absolutely can understand the Saints will play spoiler here, and there's no reason to believe it wouldn't be an upset because the NFC South is such a messy division anyway. And the Saints are looking a little bit better week on week. I think they'll give them a tougher game than people think, but I just trust that the Panthers have enough self belief, and I think Bryce Young is starting to feel himself out as a franchise quarterback, and they've got Dowdle. Just give the ball to Dowdle, and you'll score points. And I think that combined, there's enough in what the Panthers have now in terms of talent and actual game plan and self belief to back them to win this game. But I think it'll be tougher than people think.
Yeah, like again, this is probably one that I'm just gonna going. I don't think there's that big a gap, so I'll take New Orleans to try and get myself back into the running on these picks thing. But yeah, like Carolina, they're coming off a bye, so they're rested. They've just taken a big scalp in the Rams. Now, some of that was lucky circumstance where they got turnovers in red zones to kind of have big point swings. But yeah, like Carolina on paper are definitely the better team here. I just like New Orleans after a very impressive performance last week to just kind of play a little bit of spoiler in this division. And I think I've got both sets of teams hunting for the top of the division, losing to the guys underneath them, which will be kind of a nice little. It'll be very NFC South for that to be happening. Next up is a massive game. I was 50-50 on picking this one as well for my pick of the week. Detroit at the Rams, two big hitters in the NFC going at each other. We've gone with the Rams across the board. The defensive production out of the Rams of late has been very, very impressive, and their offensive production, although it had slowed a little bit from its heady heights of earlier in the season, has picked back up. Like I said, they put up 45 points last week against Arizona. Now, the the Detroit Lions are a very different prospect to Arizona, but they are also incredibly streaky. So we saw them in a very dominant win this week, but then we've also seen them lose upsets. We've seen basically the kind of flat track bully stuff that we talk about from time to time. Maybe looking more and more like what was happening with Detroit, where they can beat up a mid tier team absolutely no bother at all. But when they came up against the bigger teams, they were struggling a bit. So I'm kind of banking on that for this one. The Rams are at home. They are just, I think, one of, if not the most complete team at the moment. Them and the Seahawks are both just in excellent position at the moment, but the Seahawks are lacking a bit of teeth. We'll be talking about them in a second. So I'm going to side with the Rams, but if Detroit come out and they have an offensive game plan like they did last week and they can get the run game established to take some of the pressure from that pass rush off, then absolutely they could do it. But I'm just feeling the Rams a little bit more at the moment, so that's why I'm going for them over Detroit. Even though I like Detroit a lot, and I still think that they could turn it on. This would be a big moment to do so because they're currently really in the wild card hunt, and they're going to need to win a couple of these games to get there. Indianapolis at Seattle up next, Sean. We've gone for Seattle across the board. You don't
Yeah,
believe in Philip Rivers?
no, it's a shame because this has if you had talked about this game 2 or 3 weeks ago, you'd be like, this is an interesting game. The two kind of surprise packages of this season, the teams we didn't think were going to do well that have suddenly turned out to be quite good teams, and it's been an interesting kind of test of them. The Indy offense against the quite impressive Seattle defense, and Darnold against what the Colts defense can offer. But yeah, Indy have kind of really gone off the boil. It's not just, I mean, the Danny Dimes injury kind of kills their season in an offensive sense, unless Jonathan Taylor rediscovers his ability to get long. He's getting the same number of touches. He's just not getting as far with the touches as he was like 5 or 6 weeks ago, which is very frustrating as a fantasy owner, I have to say. So I just the Colts offense, and especially if it's going to be 44-year-old Philip Rivers or Riley Leonard under the tutelage of 44-year-old Philip Rivers under center against
Which one
this
of those is
Seattle.
preferable, actually? I'm not sure.
This is the problem. This is what the situation you get yourself into when you sign Philip Rivers. That versus this Seattle defense at the level that this defense is capable to play off, it's very difficult to see the Colts being able to keep pace. And obviously, there's problems on the offensive side for Seattle. Darnold is maybe doing the same thing he did with the Vikings last year, where his early impressiveness is kind of beginning to regress to the mean a little bit, and they're not killing off drives in the red zone as Connor talked about. But that's a very small problem in comparison to what the Colts are facing. And I just think that the Colts offense is going to struggle here to get a much going unless they come up with a very clear
Yeah.
game plan and execute it. Whereas the Seattle offense, you know, Jackson Smith and Jigba is in imperious generational form. Darnold does have his moments where they play well. I just don't think the Colts necessarily have an answer for what the Seahawks are going to be able to do, especially with their defense being as powerful as it is. So
Like
you got to go for Seattle in this one.
if I'm Seattle, I'm just putting 10 men on the line every single down, and I'm letting one guy take a break for a breather so we're staying fresh. Like I just, yeah, if they don't have an
Yeah,
answer at
Chief.
quarterback, I
Yeah.
don't know what you're gonna do. Like just
Mm-hmm.
madness. Next up is my pick of the week, Green Bay at Denver. Myself and Sean have gone for Green Bay. Ronan has gone for Denver in this one. This is a very exciting game. Both of these teams have Super Bowl aspirations. Both are right up the top of their respective divisions at the moment. Green Bay obviously coming off a very exciting victory there over the Bears. Denver coming off an underwhelming victory against the Raiders, but Denver are at home in this one. There is a real home field advantage to that. They are a streaky team that, as much as they can have a day scoring whatever 17 points against the Raiders, they can equally, put up 28 points in a quarter. So which version will we get? We don't know. This Green Bay defense has come on leaps and bounds. It's looking more like what we thought it might be at the start of the season. The pass rush has gotten better. The cornerbacks and safeties are playing much better than they were beforehand. So it won't be an easy ask for Denver. On the other side, Green Bay's offense is clicking quite well. As we said, it's not maybe the most explosive we've ever seen it, but it is efficient. It knows how to find weak spots, how to scheme things open, and this Denver defense will cause them problems. The pass rush will get after Love and so on, but they have a lot of weapons, and maybe that's I talked in the game reviews about how Mark. Golden not being involved as much and Dobbs not being involved as much in the offense. And it's games like this you might start to find that happening. Denver's got some excellent corners, so maybe this is a game where you go, okay, Matthew Golden, this is going to be your day. You're going to be up against the third cornerback or maybe sometimes getting onto a linebacker. So we're going to be planning to target you 8 to 9 times in this game and kind of getting him ready for crossers and so on. Like this is where you'll see the depth of what they can do scheme wise with these wide receivers and potentially the reason that we're seeing such fluctuation game to game is that they are kind of developing very different skill sets. So depending on what they're being given by an offense, they can kind of target or change hot routes and things like that, which will be incredibly fun to watch. So I'll be looking very closely at that in this matchup. And for the Denver side, RJ Harvey did a pretty good job last week. Although maybe he wasn't getting as many explosives as you'd like. I want to see if they could really establish the run in this one because they're gonna pin their ears back and try and come after Nix. We've seen the difference that he has whenever he's flustered, whenever he has to kind of move. He's not got the mobility that he likes to think he does, so he'll start moving and he'll start throwing when he's moving, maybe when he shouldn't. So watch them try and move the pocket in this one. And I'm just gonna back the idea of this Green Bay defense being a little bit more mature than the Denver offense, maybe getting the best of them once or twice in this game. I still think it'll be a back and forth. I think it'll be close, but I'm just going to side with Green Bay. Although from Ronan's side, I can definitely see Denver in that stadium with the home field advantage, with a crowd that's been, well, it's full of arseholes to start with, which is not the easiest one to be. But it's also just like they are so excited. They've not been in this position for what 12 years or so, I think. So like, yeah, like this home crowd's going to be raucous. It's going to be exciting. Green Bay are going to be in a tough environment. I'm just kind of trusting Matt LaFleur to be able to guide them through it, and I kind of like what I think is the flexibility they've built into this offensive scheme.
Yeah, no, I mean it'll be a tough game, and obviously both these defenses are in a very good place. I just think I'm not convinced by the Broncos, especially offensively. I think they've won a lot of games by just kind of charging into a fourth quarter, kind of momentum based Bo Nix experience, but the Packers aren't the kind of team to kind of give you that kind of opportunity. The Packers are the kind of team at the especially their current form, they'll just chip away. That Jordan Love will throw his 3 touchdowns. They'll just chip away and they'll get their 28 points or whatever. And I just don't think the Broncos. I don't think the Broncos are actually that good ultimately, even though they've won 11 games. I think the Packers are probably a better team, at least on the offensive side, and maybe they're about level on the defensive side. So I get the home field advantage is very big for Denver, but for me, I think the Packers are in a very good place, and I kind of have to back them to beat most teams in that kind of situation.
Yeah, Tennessee have to take on San Francisco, Sean. We've gone for San Francisco across the board.
Yeah, I mean the Titans are they had a game. They definitely did turn up for their one game a year, especially the running game. Pollard had a massive game last week against the Browns. Obviously, the Niners are a very different prospect. The defense is probably we thought the Browns had a good defense, but the Niners certainly do have. But with Salah back as DC, built themselves on a defense. They're quite an ugly team, San Francisco this year. They're not been winning particularly smoothly. It hasn't really looked all that good. An awful lot has been is sacrificing bodies at the altar of Christian McCaffrey to just keep his various knees and hamstrings and everything together for this run. And as long as he's the guy, and as long as he's upright and running, and he's getting the touches, this offense will score points. It's not quite at the level it was, say, in their 2023 playoff or Super Bowl run, but it's still a pretty good team. And I certainly don't think the Titans have anything to match that. The difference between kind of an offense built around Christian McCaffrey and what he can do, and an offense built around Shador Sanders and Quidkin Junkins when you don't trust Shador Sanders, which, yeah, as an aside, I thought was a particularly strange decision there. But we're not talking about the Browns in this game. We're talking about the Titans. Titans have looked a little bit better as the season's gone on. Cam Ward has looked a little bit better as the season gone on. They're still not a very good team ultimately. I think they're going to need a run game to produce as it did against the Browns on a big scale. And I think even then they're probably not as good. I think San Francisco have enough firepower on that offensive side, especially if they keep feeding the CMC monster. And I think the Salah-led defense is going to be able to stifle the Titans enough. There's not really going to be much of a contest for me. I think the 49ers, clear winners here. Is very difficult to see the Titans finding a path to victory.
Yeah, Sunday Night Football, Minnesota at Dallas. We've gone for Dallas across the board. Look, Minnesota, they went 31 to nothing last week, and it means nothing. That was nothing was happening from the other side. Dallas are confusing. They are careening hard towards the perfectly balanced 50% record of 8-8 and 1. They're going to win this game at home. I think their offensive firepower is going to be too much for Minnesota to overcome, particularly given that it's, the vaulted defense is kind of a blitz heavy simulated pressure kind of setup, and Dak deals incredibly well with that sort of stuff. The Dallas defense will see, like, they're not doing as well as they have, but I also think that JJ McCarthy is more the pumpkin that we know, not the prince that we saw last week. So let's see what happens here. But it's hard to look past Dallas. This can be their win, and then they'll have to lose again at somewhere else just to keep the balance going. But this will be a win. Monday Night Football finally. The matchup we've all been waiting for, the prime time that everyone's crying out for. Miami at Pittsburgh. I've gone for Miami. You guys have gone for Pittsburgh.
Yeah, it's another one of those weird NFL scheduling things. They've got Bills, Pats. They've got Colts, Seahawks, which at the time of scheduling would have been an interesting one. They've got Packers, Broncos. Rams, Lions, and they've decided to go with Sunday Night Football, Vikings, Cowboys, and now Monday Night Football, Dolphins, Steelers. A bit of a strange one. It's a interesting one to think about though. The Dolphins are sneakily kind of getting non-shit.
Yeah, yeah.
You think how far they've come from that kind of early weeks when they look like one of the worst teams imaginable, to suddenly being a team that's on the fringes of the playoffs, and you wouldn't necessarily discount them. They're not going to make the playoffs, but having a say in this kind of business. And this theoretically, at least, is a AFC seeding implications kind of situation for the Dolphins and the Steelers. And maybe it is just reduce how much Tua actually touches the ball, build entirely around your run game, and maybe you get some interesting places because it does feel like the Dolphins are an improving side, and it does feel like Steelers, even though they're top of their division and they may have aspirations of going deep in the playoffs, don't look particularly good. So I can certainly see how this game will be a little bit close, but I think ultimately I think the Steelers, they just find a way to win games, right? And I think we're in this kind of zone now of the Steelers grinding wins out, and I think Rodgers is starting to really get into himself as the Steelers quarterback. I think we've talked about how relaxed he seems to feel with this receiver core. That he knows the guys he likes, he knows what he can work with, and it feels like every game he's getting a little bit more comfortable in that scenario and a little bit more comfortable with his limitations. I think maybe one of the big problems with Rodgers in New York was that he still kind of believed he was the old Aaron Rodgers and was still trying to be the old Aaron Rodgers and kind of blamed the fact that his receivers were terrible, despite the fact that it was actually his throwing that was beginning to lose it. Now I think he's a little bit more sense about what he can do and what he can't do. I think with options like Metcalf and stuff, they still have the kind of long ball options when they need to. So I think offensively the Steelers, it's messy at times, and they really need to do something about that run game. But they're a winning team, and they have that momentum that Tomlin teams tend to get around the stage of the season, where they're just trundling along and picking up enough wins to get there. And so I kind of have to back them here because I'd still, despite the fact that I think the Dolphins are a much improved side, I don't 100% trust them still. And I do think you kind of do need a passing game. I think the problem ultimately with teams which become 100% run games is they just become too predictable. And this is the problem the Colts are going to run into in the back end of the season. That the Dolphins, they do need a quarterback, and Tua can be, okay, he's an interception machine or whatever. He can be a contributor to that. I think they have to find that balance if they want to proceed from this point, or as you say, wait till the offseason and find a new quarterback. But for me, I think the Steelers are just in a tiny bit better place in terms of knowing who they are, what their limits are, and I think this defense can step up when required to make life difficult for the other side. So I'll go for the Steelers to win it, but certainly I think the Dolphins could make it a game.
Yeah, like Miami's defense have stepped up hugely of late, and I think that Rodgers is, he's not a hindrance, but I don't think he's massively kind of a leader for the team, or I don't think he's a massive difference maker for them. Uh, their run game is very impressive. I think that plays this time of year better. That plays well against a Pittsburgh team that's defense is a lot slower. The one concern would be, like you said, being one dimensional against a defensive minded head coach who, even though the guys are old and slow, if you can, simplify what they need to do, then that's straightforward. But yeah, I'm just thinking Miami. I'm liking what they're doing at the moment. I'm loving this kind of like slow climb up into they're getting to be in all the in the hunt graphics now, which is just like madness really when you think about where they were in like week 4, week 5. So that's good fun for me. And again, I need to make some games up, and I think this is a close enough one that I'm going to take the less popular side of it. So very good. We've got confirmation coming out here that Rivers is signed to the practice
Breaking
squad of
news.
Indianapolis. So we'll see now whether or not, because they'll do that, they'll get him up to speed, and then they'll decide whether or not to make him kind of game active, game ready, or whatever. If your team is out there and you want to do the funniest thing in the world, you can, because he's on the practice squad. You can offer him a ticket onto your squad. Uh, like if you really
I could
wanted to,
just see that the Jags or the
yeah.
Texans or something made like, yeah, that would be very funny.
I'd be real fuck
Uh,
you if the Seahawks did it now just to stop him being available for that game. But yeah, no, so that's very good. That'll wrap us up for this week. Any plans for the weekend, Sean?
Quiet enough. We have, as I've been hinting a lot along the weeks, we have a big change in our family coming up, and that will be next week. We expect to be welcoming our first child. So that will be a big change. So just preparing for that. We're getting the room ready and we're getting everything ready and preparing the meals and all the stuff you're supposed to do. So I think that would be for the
Rest of the weekend.
foreseeable. That
Yeah,
would
very
that would be the
exciting.
big thing.
Very
Yeah.
exciting. Yeah, I think we're heading down to Kerry to do some dog sitting because my wife's friend is going to a wedding, and we said our dogs get along quite well, so I said we go down, we look after the dog for them, and yeah, that's kind of it. Got a few bits of Christmassy bits to get sorted and a few things like that, but other than that, nothing too wild or crazy. So I suppose that'll wrap us up for this week. So it's bye from myself. It's bye from Sean.
Bye.
This has been all four quarters. Thanks for listening, and we'll chat to you next week.